I call to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for January the 18th, 2024. Roll call, please.
Okay, Ballard.
Here.
Burrell.
Here.
Clapper.
Here.
Throckmorton.
Here.
Okay. I believe...
Wait, other.
Oh,
Farrell.
there's one more person. Sorry, Tim.
Did you say?
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
Nikki, sorry. Okay. We have minutes to approve. I thought, so we have the November 16th, 2023 minutes. Did we have another set of meeting minutes that were sent out to us? December's was sent out as well, right. So has everybody?
Recording in progress.
Thanks, sorry.
Okay. So we have two sets of meeting minutes to approve, the November and December minutes. Do I have a motion for either or both?
I have a motion to approve the November, can I do both?
You can?
November and December 2023 minutes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any changes, corrections, anything? Nope? Okay. Then could we have a vote, please?
Okay. Burrell.
Yes.
Clapper.
Yes.
Throckmorton.
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any reports, resolutions, and communications?
Nope, none tonight. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm Beth Rosenbarger. I'm the Assistant Director. I'm filling in for Jackie Scanlon tonight, so thank you.
Great, thank you. The petitions that are continued to our February 22nd, 2024 meeting, we only have one, and that is AA-17-22, Joe Kemp Construction, LLC, and Blackwell Construction, Inc. This evening, we have two petitions on our docket. The first one is V-42-23, Chris Valiant, and the second is V-47-23, Josie Rice. Can we please have the staff report for V-42-23, Chris Valiant?
Zoning planner from Planning and Transportation Department. I'm presenting on 346 South Buckner Street, V4223. The property in question is located at 346 South Buckner Street in the west central part of Bloomington. Yep.
That
Yes.
is, okay, I wasn't sure. Thank you.
This property is located in residential small lot R3 zoning district. It's also located in the Greater Prospect Hill Historic District. All properties immediately adjacent to 346 South Buckner are also in the residential small lot R3 zoning district. This lot has frontage on South Buckner Street to the east and frontage on West Smith Avenue to the south. The comprehensive plan's future land use map designates this property as being located in mixed urban residential, which is an area intended to contain higher densities than other residential areas, including both single-family residences and larger 2 to 4 story apartment buildings. The property currently contains one existing single-family residence, which was relocated here a few years ago. The current approved use of this site is dwelling, single-family detached. Most of the lots in the surrounding neighborhood also contain detached single-family dwellings. This is a property, this is a view of the rear of the existing property at 346 South Buckner. As mentioned, this lot has frontage on South Buckner Street to the east and West Smith Avenue to the south. This is a view of West Smith Avenue looking east. And this is a view of South Buckner Street intersecting with West Smith Avenue looking west. Because 346 South Buckner is a corner lot bordered by public streets, South Buckner Street and West Smith Street, both property lines adjacent to these two streets are considered front lot lines. The petitioner is proposing to construct a two-story addition to the existing dwelling on the site. The ground floor of the addition will serve as a garage, and the second floor as a general studio space that may become an ADU in the future. The petitioner received a certificate of appropriateness from Historic Preservation Commission in October 2023 for this design. Because the proposed addition is along West Smith Avenue, which is considered a front lot line, front lot setback standards from the UDO apply to the proposed addition. The setback standard for an attached front-loading garage or carport is 10 feet behind the primary structure's front building wall. Because the primary structure's south wall along West Smith Avenue is considered a front building wall, the standard in the UDO asks that the proposed attached front-loading garage addition be located 10 feet behind the south wall of the existing primary structure. The petitioner is proposing a variance to this setback standard so that he can place the attached garage addition at the same distance back from the property line as the primary structure's front building wall along West Smith Avenue, or in line with the primary structure's front building wall along West Smith. So the first conclusion is that the granting of variance will not be injurious to the public health, safety, or welfare of the community because the proposed addition is compatible with the local neighborhood. No other variances are involved, and the petitioner's proposed addition aligns well with both sides of the existing primary structure's building walls, which creates nice symmetry on the lot. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in an adverse manner. West Smith Street is a substandard street, averaging around 10 feet in width, used more as an alley for the local properties that all have frontage on, most of which have frontage on other larger streets. The backyards, not the front yards, of neighboring properties are immediately adjacent to West Smith Street across from 346 South Buckner. And placing the proposed attached garage in line with the primary structure's building wall won't affect the use and value, nor will it impact potential connections or aesthetics with adjacent neighbors across West Smith. Conclusion 3 is that the application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties because this existing home, the existing home on this property already has a prominent front entrance that faces the larger of the two adjacent street frontages. Although it is a public road, West Smith Avenue doesn't serve as a front for almost any other surrounding lot. West Smith side avenue of the home functions as a side and rear property line for both this property and the majority of the surrounding properties. And all properties in this neighborhood have alternative streets. Almost all properties in this neighborhood have alternative streets that serve as their street frontage. West Smith Avenue is generally used as an alley for the majority of the local properties. So the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and approve V 4223 VAR 2023-11-0017 with the following condition, that this approval is for the site design as submitted with this variance application.
Thank you very much. The petitioner, if you'd like to step to the podium and state your name, I will then swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to state your petition.
I don't really have much to add. I think Katie did a great job of summarizing everything. I had submitted some of my thoughts that were really based on what Katie summarized in the planning department's decision to approve as well.
Well, thank you. We may have some questions. We'll see what the board has to say. So we are to the board for questions. So the petitioner or staff, does anybody have any? No? Anybody? No? Okay, then, in this case, we will be to the public. Is there anybody here who would like to speak to this petition? This is your opportunity. There may be somebody online. We'll see.
If you're on the Zoom call and you would like to comment on this petition, please use the raise hand function to let us know that you'd like to do that. Thanks.
Okay. If there is no one, then we're back to the petitioner for any final comments.
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, then we're to the board for action.
I'm going to go ahead and just cut to the chase and move approval of V-42-23 with the condition as provided in the presentation.
Well, two people. There you go. You can take it.
Okay, seconded by Nikki. And any further comments before we vote? No? We're ready for a vote, please.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to attempt a better alphabetical order this time. Farrell,
Yes.
Clapper,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell.
Yes.
Okay, the variance is
5-0.
granted. Good luck with your project. Thank you. Is the petitioner online for the second case?
Their name has showed up.
Okay. Great. So we are now ready for case V-47-23, Josie Rice. Staff report when you are ready.
My name is Gabriel Holbrow, zoning planner for the city of Bloomington, here to present the variance petition for 1205 West East Branch Road, V-47-23, also numbered VAR 2023-12-0021. The location, 1205 West East Branch Road, is on the west side of the city, in a residential neighborhood just north of Allen Drive. It's toward the end of a cul-de-sac. It's a relatively short street that ends in a cul-de-sac. The property is approximately a little over 8,000 square feet. It's zoned residential small lot R3. In the comprehensive plan, it's designated neighborhood residential. The existing and proposed land use is a single-family detached dwelling. The short version of the story, it's more detailed in the staff report and in the petitioner's statement. Short version of the story is that there was a grass part of the yard where the street bends into the cul-de-sac, and the petitioner converted it to a parking area by putting down some gravel. It does not meet the standards for a parking area because it is, the width is more than what's allowed. So the existing concrete drive that you can see there in the 2013 street view is approximately 16 feet wide. The maximum driveway width in this district is 18 feet. It was by expanding between the existing driveway and the cul-de-sac, it's approximately 26 feet in that same dimension. But if you consider anywhere where the parking area meets the public right-of-way, it's so wrapping around the cul-de-sac would be 60 feet wide. And in any case, we're talking about the same parking area. To skip over some of the details, the petitioner and the staff report are in agreement about peculiar things regarding this property that include there's a narrow roadway width adjacent to the property, an unusual property shape, documented drainage issues, documented parking difficulties. So the staff report shares with the petitioner's statement findings that these are things that are a little bit unusual about the property. Where we differ is when it comes to whether there is practical difficulty in use of the property. The petitioner, by bringing the petition, is stating that there is a hardship that they're experiencing. That's why they're requesting the variance. And staff's analysis is that it is not a practical difficulty because the UDO compliant parking area does provide room, or a UDO compliant parking area provides room for 2 vehicles parked outside, and as well there's an attached garage structure that could, at least in theory, have a parking, provide a parking space as well. And there is parking, on-street parking nearby, even if it's not directly in front of the property. So the crux of the question really is whether there's a practical difficulty. I think that's the main point where staff and the petitioner differ. To go over the staff, so staff is recommending denial. Staff's proposed findings for you are for the first criterion that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Staff recommends that no, it will not be injurious to public health, safety, and welfare. Second criterion, that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff's recommended finding is that it will result in adverse impacts to the use and value of surrounding properties by reducing the aesthetic quality of the subject property's frontage when viewed from the public street from neighboring properties. Additionally, the fact that we received complaint indicates that it's already caused issues for surrounding properties. And finally, the third proposed finding, this is the criterion is that the strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property, that the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property, and that the development standards variance will relieve the practical difficulties. The proposed finding is that the narrow roadway width adjacent to the property, the unusual property shape at the elbow where the linear portion of East Branch Road meets the circular cul-de-sac at its end, and the documented drainage issues are all features of the property and its surroundings that are peculiar. These peculiar features reduce the area that can be used for UDO-compliant parking area compared to other properties of similar size. However, no practical difficulty is found because a UDO-compliant parking area has in the past provided room to park 2 vehicles outside, as well as 1 or more vehicles in the attached garage. Because the UDO does not have any minimum parking requirements for detached single-family dwellings, parking for 3 or more vehicles at the property is consistent with the expectations for this use. Additionally, as in many other areas of the city, parking immediately adjacent to the property in the public right-of-way is not guaranteed, and a review of aerial imagery shows that vehicles are parked in the right-of-way further west on this block. Based on the proposed findings and the record, the department recommends that the board adopt the proposed findings and deny the requested variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If the petitioner is online, we can pull her up.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Hi, my name is Josie.
Hi, Josie. Do you swear to, can you state your full name, please?
Josie Rice.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You have up to 20 minutes to comment on your petition. Thanks.
Okay, so I just wanted to do a little bit of background of how the petition came into fruition, really, especially after hearing that it was because of complaints. I'm sorry, so we had our car parked in halfway on the grass and halfway into the cul-de-sac. And we had received a ticket from the city stating that we needed to put the car on a approved surface. And that is when we went and put the gravel down, which was a major financial burden on our family. We put the gravel down hoping to bring our property up to code. There were neighboring properties that surround us in our cul-de-sac that also had their car parked on the cul-de-sac, and it became an issue for the city drivers who were driving to pick up trash to get around our cul-de-sac. So we ended up moving our cars out of the cul-de-sac into our property. And that also allows access for our daughter, who's 22, and she has Williams syndrome, to have an accessible parking spot to help with her disability. So she gets picked up by the Bloomington Access bus directly at our location too. So there is limited parking in front of our building as well. Our neighbors that are across the street from us, they park in their spot right in front of our house, and our house has a major drainage issues, like was in the petition. So we are unable to park in that front area at all to be able to have an accessible spot for her and without it damaging our yard. And I also have put in to try to meet the city standards, put in a rain garden that I have tried to apply for the stormwater grant for as well. So I'm trying to correct these issues on our property, but we've been kind of put in between a rock and a hard place to make it both accessible and then able for the city vehicles to turn around in our cul-de-sac, and for our neighbors to continue to have their parking spots as well. So if the parking area that we currently use is removed from us and revegetated, not only will it cause a major financial strain on our family, who is right now in a burdened situation, and then it would also cause those spots that our neighbors park in to be taken, and that would cause some strife in the neighborhood too. I've had multiple of our neighbors call me and state that they would prefer us to have that location as a gravel parking space for our family, so that we would stay and that would open up some more space for them. So that is a quick summary, not to get too into the dirt with that, but I am definitely open for any questions. This has been something that would have an impact on our family. I think it might be helpful for me to understand the definition of the practical difficulties. And if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are to the board for questions. Anybody have any questions? Anyone like to? Could you turn your mic on? Are you on?
Sorry. How long have you owned the home?
Yeah, thank you. So we are actually on a contract sale with Jeff Jones, who owns the Pendragon properties. We are really trying to take care of this home and keep it nice and not have any difficulties with him, because I know that many of the other properties that he has liens on them. So that's another reason why I would really like to protect our property and keep it looking nice for our family and our neighbors. We've been here for since 2018 is when we moved into this home.
I have a question for staff. So there were a couple of issues relating to, there's the width of the driveway, and then there's the issue of the apron. How far back does an apron typically extend? Is there a standard depth?
There's not. Different from this situation, if it were new construction, like completely new site, generally the expectation would be that the apron would be completely within the right-of-way. And for existing sites like this, it's really sort of a more of an engineering design question that often we will consult with the engineering department about. Here, there are different reasons to have an apron. The main one that would come into play for this situation would be to contain the gravel so it doesn't spill out into the street. So as long as there were some either concrete or asphalt transition from the gravel to the street in a way that would help prevent gravel from spilling out. Of course, gravel still might spill out. That can happen. But to help try to contain it, that would meet the standard. So as far as how wide it would have to be, I couldn't say right away tonight, but a few feet would be plenty.
So the width of a driveway, people can have pull-offs for parking off of their driveway. Can they not, right? That's just, is that just controlled by impervious surface stuff?
The driveway width standard applies from the front property line, the edge of right-of-way, up to the building setback line. And once you get past that, then it can widen out, and you simply just have to not go over the impervious surface coverage. And in some cases, in other districts, not this district, there's also a parking setback from site property lines, but not in this district anyway. But the width of the driveway can't widen out until you get to that building setback line. For most properties, the building is at the building setback line or at or near. So really, it only can widen out once it gets past the building. As you can see where the house is situated on this lot, there's not really a way to snake around unless you completely redesign everything about the site. While I have the microphone, I just do want to mention that we had received one call from a neighbor who was not able to attend tonight, simply expressing their support for the variance.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to be clear. So this to staff, that currently the actual poured driveway is 16 feet wide, according to this, right? So what's allowed? Just the 16 feet was
18 feet is allowed, so it could be widened by another 2 feet and be fully compliant.
I'll go further to just clarify. So one of the arguments being made here is because of the cul-de-sac coming around, you could really say that there's 60 feet of actual coverage on the public roadway. Is that am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on for what purpose you're asking the question, how wide is it? If you're asking for the purpose of, I'm implementing the law and I don't care about common sense, I just care about exactly what the law says, I would say the answer is 60 feet. If you're thinking about it common sense-wise, what is the impact? It's more like 26 feet.
Could they take out the current gravel, take it off the board? So they have the 16-foot. If they came from the cul-de-sac side, and would they be allowed to put another drive off there onto their property or not? What's allowed? I'm sorry?
concrete?
Well, I'm just saying, what's
Understood that
allowed for them to do? Would they even be allowed to do that? You follow what I'm saying?
In theory, yes. I mean, it depends on exactly the design and so on, but in theory.
So you could work
certainly.
with them to try to find a way to eliminate that patch of gravel that's essentially 60 feet wide, leave the existing driveway, and then find a way to pull off from the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, although as a practical, right, but they would have to remove the existing drive cut.
That's my question. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so you'd have to remove the existing drive cut. So you might be able to shift it 90 degrees, but you wouldn't get any more width or length, so.
That was my
It
question.
wouldn't really get them anything.
Yeah, the question is whether there could be two. And
No, there cannot be two. Thank you
all.
for
Yeah.
clarifying that.
Thank you.
Nikki, did you have another question?
No, Mr. Throckmorton asks basically the same thing, so.
Okay.
This is for staff. How's the parking on East Branch Road? I see that there is a vacant lot across the street. Is it parking on one side of the road or two sides of the road or none?
So parking restrictions are codified in municipal code in Title 15. If you look in Title 15, East Branch Road is not mentioned, meaning that parking on both sides of the street is not forbidden.
The citations for the access for sanitation, essentially. So that happens one day a week. So essentially, not parking there for that one day, they could avoid any ticketing, right? They would not be ticketed the rest of the time, would they? They're being ticketed because they're obstructing sanitation.
So the exact reason for the tickets is not firmly established in the record. I guess I'll say, at least, I'm not sure how many tickets there have been. At least one of them was for parking on unimproved surface, which is a little bit of a different issue.
In the report that you gave, you specifically called out difficulty with the sanitation.
Yes, that I may have to amend a little bit of my wording. The wording in the staff report is, city parking enforcement has issued tickets to vehicles parked in the public right-of-way of East Branch Road, based at least partly on the obstruction the parked vehicles caused for city sanitation trucks serving the homes on the street. I have to amend that and say, city parking enforcement has issued tickets to vehicles parked in the public right-of-way of East Branch Road, period. There have been complaints about obstruction, that parked vehicles obstructed city sanitation trucks from serving homes on the street. I actually have not been able to verify that that was what caused the tickets, but it is clear from the petitioner's statement that there have been complaints and instructions from city sanitation not to park on the cul-de-sac.
I guess what I'm getting at is if they were asked to remove the gravel area, the question becomes, where, if anywhere, could they park on the cul-de-sac legally
So,
without getting ticketed? Since it's a public street.
this is getting a little bit outside of my knowledge into parking enforcement's rules and standards. My understanding is that it would be legal to park anywhere on the cul-de-sac. That said, it's probably a bad idea to park in the cul-de-sac, even if it's legal.
Well, those are two different things. The question is, can they legally park there
Yeah, I
and
don't-
reasonably expect not to be ticketed because it's legal?
I'm uncomfortable stating what parking enforcement would or wouldn't do, but to staff's knowledge, it would be legal to park. It would not be illegal to park on the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, whether it's a good idea or not, that's another discussion. But, for the purpose of trying to determine what to do in this case, I'm just trying to understand if they have an option to street park.
Possibly down the street, not on the cul-de-sac.
Not on the cul-de-sac, but down the street.
Seems like it would be more advisable.
Well, again, the difference between advisable, because what you'll run into then is a legal issue is, legally am I allowed? That's why I'm asking if it's, what the legality is.
I don't know. I think that the staff report also kind of says that it's somewhat irrelevant, the street parking, because there are plenty of places in town where you can't park on the street. And the code, in terms of, you know, your parking allowance is the same across all of the zoning, you know, the residential zoning districts, regardless of what the street condition is.
That's a good
Right?
summary of staff's analysis, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
In Title 15, which is not the UDO, but relevant to the question of where you can park, you can park on that street. I think, I will just say as staff, I'm happy for us to follow up. If there's a section of street that's repeatedly an issue with the streets department, it would make sense for us to identify that and put signs out so that's clear to people. So if regularly people can't actually park on the cul-de-sac, we would rather have a clear regulation about that. The code also says you have to maintain 12 feet of clear space on the street. So what we see in a lot of neighborhoods and small streets is that people do a great job of that, of self-regulating in terms of, even though you can park on both sides of the street, they are surprisingly logical and, you know, alternate or space out and do different things like that so that a vehicle could still get through. So just to clarify how some of that works. Thanks.
The story of the question really was just to determine whether it was going to turn into a legal question or not. So that was why I asked. Thank you.
Ms. Rice, can you talk a little bit about the stormwater issue and where exactly on the property do you have that? Because I wasn't clear exactly where on the property that issue is.
Yes, thank you. So the stormwater issue starts from the top of West East Branch Street, and it pours down on our side of the road, and it all floods and lands into our front yard. We have kind of a dip there. So it flows from our front yard and floods the front yard, and then kind of goes directly across the street into the lot that is right across from us. Sometimes it looks like a little raging river. So I have tried to kind of regulate that as well, but I'm not having, I think that's more of a long-term problem that we will try to work on.
So that, when you say in your front yard, that's in front of the entry to the house, sort of,
Sure. So like where other neighbors in our location seem to park is they park half of their car in their grass and half on the street, which opens up the street for the city vehicles and other vehicles to get through. And when we have our flooding, it is completely unable for us to pull on. So we would take up the whole road, which would block our neighbor's driveway there. And I do hear a lot of the down the street parking, which I understand because I was a college student at IU. I've lived here and I stayed here, so I'm grateful to be here. So I would park way far away back in the day and walk to my housing. But again, with our daughter, it just creates a difficulty for us practically for her to be able to get to our vehicles because of her mobility issues.
Josie. From the map, from what I'm looking at, the aerial map, it looks like you are parking about 4 cars there every day. Is that correct?
So we have 3 vehicles that we use daily.
Have you considered the possibility of moving 1 into the garage and then having 2 behind it, and then taking the 4th vehicle to a location up the street?
So our garage is currently not inhabitable for a vehicle, but yes, I do understand that that would be the most ideal of the situation. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Then we are to the public. If there's anybody here who would like to speak to this, we are to the public. If there's anybody here who would like to speak to this petition, now is the opportunity. There's no one in chambers.
If you're participating on Zoom and would like to comment, please use the raise hand function.
Nobody? Okay. Then we are back to the petitioner for any further comments.
Yeah, I do recognize this is a very logically driven group and that emotional appeals probably don't have much weight. But I would like to give my 2 cents if possible. I've tried to manage this on my own and just trying to make everybody happy, starting with the city vehicles and with neighbors and with the rain garden. So we're really trying to make steps to show the city that we do care for our property and we want to take care of it in the best way that we can. I feel that if this is not approved, then it will fall into probably the hands of Jeff Jones. I'm not sure if you guys have better communication with him than I do, but I know there are multiple properties with Pendragon properties that have liens on them. I would hate to see this property fall into that sort of cycle that I've watched other neighboring houses in our neighborhood fall into. So I just kind of want to put my heart out there and tell you that I'm really trying to take care of our property and our home, and that this would be a great blessing to our family if it was approved. And that is it. And I thank you guys for your time too.
Thank you. Okay, then we are back to the board for any further questions or discussion, and/or eventually we need a motion.
I guess I would just ask this to the rest of you, in terms of what Ms. Rice just explained, would that fall under being deemed a practical difficulty, which is this could get into a much more complex situation for them, given the structure of how they are trying to buy the home, if it goes into a lien situation that way? I mean, that to me, I think, plays a factor. What I'm trying to think through here of how to come to a decision, but
So I think we would need some legal guidance. And I know that Ms. Rice asked earlier about how a practical difficulty is defined. And usually that is, or what we understand is that it is something, a practical difficulty is something that's tied to a unique characteristic of the property physically. The way it's situated, its context, it's, the shape, you can name it, but it sort of rests in the physical aspect. And we do not take into account other considerations, unless, if you could perhaps give us
just
some.
to be clear, so when we're talking about practical difficulties under the law, it's not a limited set of circumstances. It is actually very circumstantially driven, which is kind of what you're alluding to here in terms of the property. There are 3 factors, though, that the court system has encouraged boards to look at, and just to list those really quickly. One of those is whether there will be some significant economic injury that will result in the enforcement of the ordinance. Whether that injury, though, is self-created is a second factor. And then the third factor are whether there are feasible alternatives. So when we're talking about the physical nature of this property, that's probably where you get into the are there feasible alternatives and how much economic injury might be suffered here, or whether it was self-created by for instance, not to apply too strictly to the facts of, how many cars are being parked, whether there's unimproved surfaces and things like that. So it's an open list of factors, just to be clear though, and you can consider any of the factors that you've heard tonight just to, in that particular element of practical difficulties.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps, thank you.
Okay. I have a question for staff. The reason that we limit the size or the width of driveways, can you talk a little bit about that and, sort of why our ordinance is written the way it is?
I will try to give some answers to that, and if Beth Rosenbarger wants to add some more, I'll ask her too. But I think there's one of the reasons is essentially aesthetic, that or aesthetics that ties into other things about creating a sense of community. So there's the way that cars look when all you see from the street is just all these parked cars, and some might I think one of the things that's behind the limit on the width is that is simply visually unattractive. There's also something to say about that shows a community of vehicles, not a community of people. And so there's part of it's about making space for the building to be visible, the windows to be visible, a porch or a front entry to be visible, to make it more of a community of people, and places for people as opposed to places for vehicles. Then there's also related to that, but it's a way of indirectly limiting how much parking can be on a site, which is indirectly also make just small incentives toward making it more possible to not be dependent on motor vehicles, and particularly the internal combustion putting out carbon pollution. That's more of it's a few steps away, but that's there in the regulation. It's there in the goals as well. If you think there's anything that should be added to that.
Everything Gabriel said, and a big part of driveway widths is pedestrian safety usually. So it's actually most of the time people pull into driveways and then they're backing out onto the street. You could always back into your driveway, but if in this case, there's not a sidewalk on that side of the street, so people are, if they're walking, going to be in the street. If there is sidewalk, usually driveways are over sidewalks, and we want to limit the amount of times there are vehicles crossing a sidewalk. So in other areas, or in some zoning districts in the city, as you all are familiar, if there's an alley present, that's why we require alley usage for driveways and garages in order to reduce the amount of, or the instances of cars driving over the sidewalk. So that safety element is one portion too. Thanks.
And if we were to allow the gravel to remain, it would still need to be retained and defined with an edging, or because there is no infrastructure along the street. There's no curb.
That would be a UDO requirement, yes. I would recommend that if the board is interested in making findings to grant approval, I would recommend a condition just stating explicitly that those sections of code that is requiring an apron and requiring a raised border to contain the gravel, that those just, I would recommend a condition to just explicitly state that those apply.
Sure.
Ms. Rice, I have a question for you. You said you're under contract. So is this a conditional sales contract? Are you renting to own?
Yes, so that is a really great question. So we were in a pretty vulnerable situation 5 years ago. I'm a stepmom to 8 kids. We have 4 young boys living in the house with us. And at the time, I found this home in a lovely neighborhood and signed a conditional contract. It was a 1-year contract sale with Jeff Jones, with the condition that we could refinance with a mortgage in 1 year. That 1 year came around, and whenever we went to refinance, the kind of can of worms opened up that he has so many liens on his properties that we were not legally able to refinance with a bank. So we were kind of manipulated into this situation, and we're under the understanding that we would be on a mortgage at this point. So 5-6 years later, we are still on contract and paying to the bank of Jeff Jones. But overall, we have kept the relationship on good terms because we love our property and we are not planning on leaving at any time soon.
Thank you.
To own.
Rent to own, thank you.
Yeah.
Just wanna make sure.
She does not own the property.
Okay.
Any discussion? Does anybody want to?
I mean, I'm not really sure what to do with this. I could easily see how a cider, I call it, to the existing driveway near the garage would work, so that you could have side-by-side parking. I believe, based on what you said earlier, it's not beyond the line, that there's the setback line, but that I could vary to say, well, go ahead and put it in, because then you're not parking the car right up against the cul-de-sac line. Right. So that, for me, I can see that there are ways to get somewhere to alleviate the issue. There's some jockeying that would have to take place to address the daughter, making sure that the car can pull in, instead of being down the street. Those are things that can be handled personally.
Right.
But in terms of a realistic addition to this house that would probably, because of the location at the cul-de-sac, not have those issues of pedestrians, there's no sidewalk there, et cetera. So I could see that being reasonable without encroaching on the cul-de-sac. But, I mean, I don't know whether that does anything for us, but I could see that that could be a variance, that if that came in saying, here's the plan I want to do that, that's something I could do. I'm not really comfortable with just saying, just leave the gravel there, cover it, and, because it just doesn't seem like a good way to go down that road. But I think there's other ways to get to alleviate some of the issues here.
Right. And at this point, the variance that's being requested is for, it's specific. Well, it says a variance from driveway pavement width standards to allow a parking area in the front yard that exceeds 18 feet. So that's the actual variance that we would be granted, or are we tied to a certain number? Was there a request?
I'd like Mr. Allen to chime in, but my understanding is that within their request has set the scope of what they're asking for. They're asking for relief from that part of code. And they're asking for everything that's there now to be allowed. If the board finds that there are reasons to grant some relief, but puts conditions on it that's not everything that they ask for, I believe that's well within your scope of what's the request and what you can do.
Because that's a pretty broad. They could put more if we approve this, because it's not specific.
I would also recommend, if you're considering approval, to put some sort of limits on what's approved. For example, you could have a condition saying something like only the existing expanded driveway as shown in the petition materials is approved, no further expansion is allowed. You could have a condition like that. You could have a condition that limits it more if you find reasons in your findings to have such a condition.
Yeah, I was supporting Barry in that. That's a pretty wide variance to just grant as written. Right. So absolutely, there would have to be, yeah.
Did you have something to add, Mr. Allen?
Reasonable conditions can be placed on it under section 918.5, which is the Board of Zoning Appeals statute.
Okay, because sometimes the way the request is written kind of locks us into just granting that or not granting that, but not the case here.
That's correct.
Okay.
They can park on the lot across the street regardless of the ownership of that lot. I think that would be completely out of bounds because that's outside of the request. It's granting relief that has nothing to do with the condition, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so I think there are things that could be out of your bounds, but I think conditions on the shape of the driveway are totally within reasonable conditions on what you're looking at.
Okay, so do we want to think about a crafting?
I do have one question, and I think the board may know this. What would be the standard width of a two-car side-by-side driveway?
Well, 18 feet is the,
18 feet would handle two cars? I'm sorry?
yeah.
It's missing 2 feet.
Yeah, so if it had an extra 2 feet, it would be a,
You could park 2 cars side by side, possibly.
yeah, it wouldn't line up obviously with the garage, but it would be wide enough for 2 cars to park, so you could theoretically have 4 cars in there, theoretically.
Correct.
There are other homes in the neighborhood that have 2-car driveways, and if you look back at the picture from 2013, this has been, it looks like an issue since 2013. People have been parking on this grassy,
I see
grassy
that.
knoll, so.
But in order for the purpose of, finding some relief, I would, that would be something I could support if we approved a variance that allowed for an additional 2 feet on the existing driveway, and then that should alleviate the.
They can do that by right.
Okay, so we don't even have to approve it.
Right. But this to me, so I'm a little confused because it looks like is it an 8-foot, 9-foot garage door? I mean, it just does not look to be as wide as 16 feet.
At the table here, I think, I actually do not recall where this 16-foot came from. And it was definitely not because I went out there and measured it.
Okay.
So that 16-foot is strongly approximate. It
Okay.
could be well under 16 feet currently.
It's not facing-
I think I would strongly discourage you from having any kind of condition so many feet more than the existing driveway, since we're not sure exactly how wide that is.
Right.
I think it would be much safer to simply say what the allowed width would be.
Right, I didn't realize until I was told, though, that it could be done by right. If they're allowed, if this house is allowed an 18-foot wide drive, then they can do that without any variance at all, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Right, and my estimation is that's 10 to 12 feet wide right now.
It doesn't look 16 at all.
Yeah.
So, that would be the issue. If you denied the variance, you would just say you have every right to expand that, so long as both the current owner, and the current petitioner understand that they could simply expand it. But it would have to be, what type of surface would it have to be? Could it be gravel as well?
It could be gravel, yes. As long as it's contained within a raised border.
So they could contain it, so they could take the materials they've already purchased, move it into a different position, and be well within their rights. So long as it's contained to not exceed the 16 feet.
Yes, and we would have to have an extended apron as well.
Yeah, understood.
There would need to be, yeah.
Understood, okay. Thank you. Does that help us at all?
Well, we can ask Ms. Rice what she thinks of that. So what we're discussing right now, Ms. Rice, is that it looks like you only really have a driveway that's like 10 to 12 feet wide. And so legally, you can have up to 18 feet in width, which is designed to allow two vehicles to park next to each other. And then, depending on the length of the driveway, and it looks like you have enough length, then you could have vehicles parked behind those two cars as well. So, what we're discussing is that it might be possible to kind of rake the gravel over so that it is just adjacent to the existing parking, so that that gravel area and the existing driveway in total is 18 feet wide, and then would allow you to park those 3 or 4 cars that you're needing to park there. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. I think that, I think I'm still a little bit curious about what the retaining option with edging would be. But like you all discussed, I am definitely open to your advice with this. My whole process has been to try to get our home nice, and I want to do that in the best way possible. If that is the grace that we're offered, I still think that it would be a financial difficulty for us, but we can try to figure that out. I've done measuring, and whenever I was doing it, it seemed that the 18 feet was it was only extending it just a tiny bit. That's where this all came from, is we were just kind of shocked that that's as far as we could extend it. So that was just kind of the process that we went through when we were measuring.
So what is the width then? If you've measured the driveway, what is the width of the driveway?
I believe it was 16 feet because it was only adding on 2. I believe that's what the report said as well. That's my understanding of it.
Okay.
The width. I'm looking, and my recollection is that in the staff report, I got the 16 feet directly from the petitioner's statement. I'm looking at aerial imagery now, and like most driveways, there's the width that it is on the property, and then once it gets into the right-of-way, it flares out to allow turnings. That's usually where the apron is. So I'm measuring on aerial imagery. This is not exact at all, but it appears that where it flares out and meets the existing pavement of the street, it's approximately 16 feet. But it appears to be within the right-of-way, and it narrows as you come from the street into the property, it narrows, and actually on the property, it appears to be 12 feet. So it may have been that Ms. Rice was measuring right at the edge of pavement where it does appear to be 16 feet, but it narrows down. So once it's on the property, it appears closer to 12 feet, which would match what you were estimating based on the garage door size.
So I think for me, the direction that we take revolves around this. It sounds like we can deny this because both the homeowner and the current person, people renting, the petitioner, have the ability to solve this problem by expanding their driveway to what's allowed. So if that's the case, that seems to be the simplest, best way to approach it, and right now, from what I'm hearing. I'd love to hear other opinions.
I agree with that. I think in conjunction with them working with city staff in terms of making sure if this is denied, they still know how wide they can go, and getting the barrier in place that's necessary, like you guys would continue to work with them to make sure that was done in compliance. Yeah.
I think the biggest issue maybe for the petitioner might be if you own property, let's say in the county, that doesn't have these strict width, you have the advantage of more space. And I think it's more difficult sometimes to think I'm living in the city with some restrictions. And even though it's 18 feet by code, they may feel that's tight, but that's still what other people are getting. And that's that is a coded issue, right? So I think that sometimes is the misconnect. So I'd really like to have a little more space, and it's easier to spread. But for me, that's not a big enough argument to go away from letting them use what they're allowed to first, before granting a variance.
I'm inclined to agree. I think that there are feasible alternatives available, like utilizing the garage and moving vehicles around, and I think that there are some other ways that this can be overcome.
I think our hope is that you could just reuse the material that's there and just maybe reconfigure it a little bit, add the appropriate edging with guidance, and that will kind of bring you into a compliant situation and allow you to use the property as you need to.
So we're still back to the board, right? So we can make a motion. I mean, I would make a motion that therefore to deny V-47-23 with the caveat, additional statement of because this is an issue that could be handled within code to still provide the petitioner the relief they need.
Comments? Okay, then we're ready for a vote.
Clapper,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Okay, so the variance is denied, but you will be able to work with planning to sort out the configuration so that it is code compliant and can meet your needs. Okay? Okay, thanks so much. Okay, and we are adjourned.